Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your co-host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by an entrepreneur in residence at Techstars. We're going to talk about what changes in your sales process in your company from closing your first 10 unrelated customers to closing your first 100. We're going to talk about that journey, what it takes, what you need to do, tools you need, how to make sure you're learning from each step, and when should you be hiring, making that next hire. So a little bit outside of the sort of tactical, like just sales stuff. Touches a little bit more on starting a company, but I think it's super relevant for anybody that's early in a company that maybe you're at 10, maybe you're at 30, 50, it doesn't really matter. It's what are some of the differences between selling to those very early evangelist customers and selling to the sort of more mainstream. So long-winded intro over. Sean Higgins, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Collin. Great to be here.
Yeah, man. So before we jump into the content, give us a little bit of background. Why are you uniquely positioned to answer these questions about, going from 10 to 100?
Yeah, absolutely. So I see it all the time, right? So my role within Techstars as entrepreneur in residence, I work with new companies, helping them make this leap, whether they're, just launching their product, trying to land their first handful of customers, their first 10, or more often than not, they've got a little early traction, but they're trying to figure out how do they actually go from early traction to early scale. My background on that side, so I'm a startup founder. I founded a company called Ilos in the B2B space where I led sales from 0 to 1.5 million in annual recurring. I also, did some financing, raised some money there. How I got involved with Techstars, I actually was a Techstars founder. I went through a Techstars program myself down in San Antonio. And so from that background of being on the front lines, building the sales process, now to helping other companies make that journey, it's something that just gets me fired up.
Very cool. And were you in sales before founding your own company?
I actually was not. So there were three of us founders. There's myself, Peter, who's our CTO, and Nick, who's our product leader and visionary. And I was looking around one day. I was originally our finance guy, and I had paid all the bills for that month, and we didn't have any customers.
Well, yeah, because that's like in an early startup stage, it's like 10 minutes of work.
Right. You don't have anything to do, for sure.
Well, we still don't have any money.
Right. Exactly. I was looking around one day and Peter was hard at work coding something up and Nick was sketching something out, making some new feature. And I thought to myself, I was like, all right, who's going to go get the customers? Like, it's probably not either one of these guys. And so I was like, okay, it's probably something I have to do. And I really learned it all from the school of hard knocks on the sales side, man. I remember my first day, I sent 20 outbound cold emails. They were all crazy custom, and I thought I was crushing it. And then I didn't get any responses. And like after, several periods of that, you really start to figure out what works and what doesn't for your outbound, for your automation. And yeah, it was definitely from the school of hard knocks where I got my sales education.
Cool. So let's talk about when you had your first 10 customers. So you're sitting there. Let's fast forward, skip the early, really challenging bit of like getting to those first 10. Because I think the sale changes from, it's sort of like, it's a product. It's not really a sale. It's like product validation until you have 10 paying customers. I could be wrong on this, but that's how I see the world. It's you're still closing, but it's like, it's a different type of closing. You can't really hire an account exec to do that for you. So let's assume we've gone through that hard part. Now we're at the next hard part, right? So this is like, that part is like hard. You got to hang on for dear life. This part is like, you're accelerating faster and you're falling down. So you've got these 10. What do you do next? How do you find the next 10? How do you get that up to 100 and get to that next sort of plateau?
Yeah. So if you've got 10, what you'll really have is you'll have a group of people that are already bought into what you're doing. Ultimately, what it takes to go from 10 to 100, it's three things. One is your message. So early startups, what you're doing is you're going to be iterating and trying different messages, right? So with messaging, it's all about, in my opinion, the three questions: why anything, why us, why now, right? So why anything is, why does my product category matter? If I'm selling the first CRM and someone says, oh, I have a spreadsheet, you're going to need a way to get around that conversation, right? That's going to happen quite a bit. Why us is really the more direct one. This is something that I feel that, most sales training teams focus on a lot, right? It's, you're in this space. So you're in CRM, you have to know Salesforce, you have to know HubSpot, Pipedrive, et cetera. in order to compete in the space. You have to know why you're different, right? Why us? And then the last one is why now? Why should this customer move on your product or solution today instead of in 6 months or a year? This is where most startups think they have an answer at 10 and realize they don't have a very good one. And their answer at 100 is actually usually pretty simple, but also pretty effective. So that's like the messaging side, right? You know, where you're trying to figure out exactly what to tell your prospect. On the customer side, one of the things that you know is you just have a better. Oh yeah.
Sorry, Sean. Just before we
dive in,
move on from let's go deeper into the messaging. So you've got your first 10.
Yeah.
What was the transition like from, okay, you send your first 20 garbage emails and nobody responds. How do you come up with that right messaging when you're so early? Because in this, there's no sales ops here. There's no marketing. There's nobody telling you this is what you need to send. And this is not a unique position. I'm sure there's lots of salespeople out there, myself included, that have been in this situation for an existing company that was more than, had more than 10 customers, more than 100 customers.
For
right.
Sure.
So how do you go from no messaging at all to messaging that's people are responding to?
Yeah. So I really like using that same framework, the why anything, why us, why now. And so it comes down to testing, as a BDR and SDR or like a BDR founder, quote unquote, you're really doing a lot of the legwork, but it's your job to figure out kind of the story behind your prospect, the story behind your customer, what's going on. And at very early stages, whether you're in a new market or you're running with a new company, that kind of boils down into, what's their situation with your product category? Is this something they're already doing? Is it something that they're not even aware of, right? That why anything? Do they understand the value behind the category? And you learn that just from conversations. So you might send several emails focused just on why anything, almost educational kind of content. Drift did a great job of this as to why you needed more conversational email marketing. That wasn't really a software category 4 years ago. Now it is. And they kind of educated us as to why that should be a category. If you're in a space that's already really well defined, like the CRM world, and you're not getting demos, you're talking to folks, they're not interested in chatting with you, generally it means that your why us isn't stronger than whatever they're doing today, right? So why us can mean a number of things. It can mean you versus the competitor, but it also can mean you versus whatever they're doing today. Even if that thing today is, hey, I'm not really doing anything, that can be a pretty tough competition sometimes, just that resistance to change that you face overall in sales. And so as you're iterating on the message, it's really, you work those 3 points in order. So if you're not getting anybody on the phone, your why anything is usually, maybe you're in a category no one understands yet. You have to focus on educating. If you're getting people on the phone, but they're not willing to take that next step with you, right? They're saying, we've already got something. Sorry. You need to try your different approaches to why us. It could be a price play. Maybe you can offer a promo. As a founder BDR, you can usually get pretty creative on that stuff. Maybe it's a new feature that you'll get them access to, or the ability to, if you're at 10, they still have a chance to influence the product more so than they would at 1,000 customers, right? So that can be valuable. And then lastly, going down to why now, testing different exploding offers, seeing if you can get people to, do some interesting things. One of my favorite why now promos was a show us your bill. So if you're using a competitor X, Y, or Z, if you show us your bill and book a demo in the next month, we knew we were a lower cost provider at the time. We'll beat your price by 20% guaranteed. And you'd have people sending us their actual contracts with these competitors. Yeah, and you're like, wow, now we know what they're paying. So it helped us grow our business in a number of areas. We had a better sense of pricing from this. We knew that they were unhappy with what they were paying currently. And you got a lot of good info from that. That's some good detective work.
Yeah, works well, especially if you're going for that, undercutting the competition. I hate selling more cheaper, because they're just, the only way to sell more value is to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
The race to the bottom. Yep.
Yeah.
You can run a similar type of promo with an exploding offer if you have a feature that is light years above what the competition is doing, right? So say you've got a capability that they just can't do, and it's something that, it's a checkbox that's unchecked. You can offer that and, match price, or even charge a higher price, but give them still a little bit of a kicker. Hey, we'll throw in that feature if you can, book the demo in the next month. It's all about, especially in long sales cycles for undefined products, you got to manufacture that urgency a little bit.
So we've got our basically the top 3 level questions, why anything, why us, why now? We've got those answered. We feel like our messaging is resonating. What's next?
Oh man. So when you get that, and you'll get that when you start having, maybe 100, maybe 200 conversations, you'll start to have a sense of what certain people value. At that point, it's time to find more of those people. And this is an area where I talk to a lot of startup founders doing sales, and they're always complaining about, certain tools, buying lists. Lists are expensive. I don't have $100,000 to invest. And I've never been a big list guy. I don't know, have you ever like gone out and bought like the big, 200,000 lists? Sometimes it works, but
I've bought more bad lists than I care to admit.
Right. I've done it, right? I've tried it. When you're a startup founder, you're trying everything. But I think, yeah.
I was just going to say, there's good lists, there's bad lists, and this is something I could talk about for infinity. I think a lot comes down to the context of what you do with the list. If you're sending garbage messaging to a great list, you're still going to get a garbage response. So I think a lot of people, I think it's easy to blame the list because you don't want to blame yourself of, I wrote crappy messaging.
Right.
Well,
right.
Pardon my French, but if your messaging sucks, it doesn't matter how good the list is.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's so important to start with those 3 questions, right? You have to know in the eyes of your customer, why anything, why us, why now, or you're not ready to talk to anybody, period. Won't matter how many at-bats you get, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So on the list side.
You're not a fan of building a list? Yeah.
Yep. Of buying lists. I'm a huge fan of building lists.
Okay.
So I'm big on this concept of, just-in-time list delivery. So if you go out to certain folks and buy lists, a lot of times my issue with lists is just normal CRM turnover. So 30% of a CRM turns over in the course of a year. It just happens. And so if someone's sitting on a list and they're not updating it very frequently, you're going to probably end up buying, 70% of what you were hoping you'd get, just running the numbers. And I think that with just-in-time list building, you can use things like Upwork, where you're hiring, a couple data scrapers, hosting what I call a tryout, where they're kind of competing against each other to get the best contact accuracy, and you're looking at things like cost per lead and things like that. And you can actually create very high quality lists, and it doesn't actually take that long. And so I built out 40,000 accounts, a list for 40,000 accounts in a period of a couple months. You have a team of Upworkers working on that. You can get the cost down to about 15 to 30 cents per. There are also solutions that do, not that route, but they do list building on demand, like Prospectify down in Austin. They're getting early traction doing just that. And I think that those can be really good routes. So the message is working. It's time to get more people. And that starts with building a list, right? Getting the title, getting the industry. And those are all things that you won't know at 10 that you'll be testing.
Yeah, I'll just add, as somebody who used to have a tiny army of Upworkers or Elancers, which just was a cooler name, I think.
For sure.
I imagine these like little tiny people riding around on horses, like with a lance, like building lists for me. There's so many different providers out there. It's almost easier if you're able to just get something like, we had Ryan O'Hara from Lead IQ on. We use their stuff. It's great. It's not like, nothing is perfect because like you said, there's 30% turnover. But when you're building it just in time, you're on their LinkedIn, you can grab 100 people at a time. It only takes you, and especially if you're on a small team, you might not need the scale of 40,000. So getting something like, what was it, Prospectify?
Prospectify, yep.
Or Lead IQ or Hunter or any of those tools, and like building the list yourself. Zach, honestly, you could probably build, like I've built fairly reasonable these size lists for a week at a time in like an hour or two. And if you check out, if you're thinking about doing this, we did an interview with Cole Fox. He's with Bergal Sagemont now, awesome private equity firm, buys companies, accelerates them. But he used to be the CRO at Lead IQ, and he shared a ton of cool LinkedIn hacks. Like my favorite was when you're in the search, there's a way of, you click on the link and you just change, there's like count equals like 20. You just change it to count equals 100 or 200. There's some maximum. I think it's 200, but it might be 100. And then all of a sudden you've got, your tool for grabbing emails up and you just click, get all of these, please. And now you're sourcing 100 at a time or 200 at a time instead of, 20 at a time. It saves you like 10 clicks, 10 page refreshes. That's like, it's not a lot of time, but when you're doing this, it adds up and it just feels so much better.
Oh man, I cannot agree with that more. So the next point that I love in like building and going from 10 to 100 is automation, right? So it's all about taking those manual parts out of the process. And if you can go from 10 clicks to 2 every time, that's a trade you want to be making, right? Mm-hmm. Love it.
Yeah. So you're building your list. You've got your army of e-lancers just like battling out there, building this list. What happens next?
Yeah, so it really leads into to automation, and so there's a number of tools you can use for sales automation. You know, back in the day when I launched my company, SalesLoft actually had just launched their product, Cadence. It was brand new, and so the pricing for Cadence was very affordable if you were a startup sales leader.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I should have never canceled my account. I should have locked in that lifetime rate or whatever. But basically, you know, a tool like a SalesLoft, or if you're using like HubSpot's, their sales automation, or Reply.io, or any of them, what they enable you to do is send a series of steps, whether it's emails, dials, you can do some other activities like LinkedIn messaging or LinkedIn pokes, and just really build up a series of touches. I met with a startup founder that had a great list of contacts, but he wasn't sending enough touch points. You know, he had hit some folks with like, you know, an email a long time ago, and we said, well, wait a minute, you know, what if you had actually 8 touches over a period of time instead of just 1 or 2? You know, do you think that would lead to better results? And he implemented this like the week after I talked to him. He followed up with all of those people, and he showed me his inbox. It was full of customers wanting to demo with him.
Awesome.
And it was great. It's like, so, you know, that sales automation enables you to do just that and not have just one-off emails that it's way too time consuming to manage.
Because there's nothing worse than you're sitting there and you're like, do I really want to follow up with this guy or this girl? And like, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll do it next week. You know, I just sent him an email. Whereas if you strip away some of that hesitation, some of that anxiety, and just say, listen, I'm going to trust my email system. I'm going to write some good messaging that's relevant. And this tool is going to help me be consistent and be bold and never sort of wuss out from making that next follow-up.
Every time, it's no longer a decision, right? You're not even having that internal dialogue. It's just happening automatically. That's going to get you the most at-bats, which is huge early days.
Yeah. Funny story. Oleg from the founder, Reply.io, him and I founded our companies right next to each other in this co-working space in Vancouver.
That's super random. So ever since the SalesLoft increased their pricing, it's still a great tool for teams. But if it's just like one person sending emails, I send everybody to Reply.io right now. So I love it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. There's lots of great tools out there. We were sort of competitors for a while. We've got our own kind of tool, but we're using pretty much anything anything that's like industry best practice. We're giving it a try. We've got almost every sales tool up and running because we do this combined service where we're just throwing the kitchen sink at it. So it's pretty cool.
One of the ones that I recommend in sales automation, not a tool, but just, you know, I always recommend doing it yourself in-house, especially as that startup sales leader, because one of the things that we haven't really mentioned yet is the learning portion of it. Whether it's figuring out which tools work, all the way down to which message works, you want to have that info in-house. So while, you know, you could hire outsourced BDR firms or sales firms to come in for you, and a lot of that stuff is great at scale, right? Like you need a pinch hit. You're like, how are we going to make our number this quarter? You're like, call up Collin, right? We got this. But if it's that first 10, you know, you really want to have a lot of that knowledge so you're able to bring people in later and actually get them off the ground. Because, you know, if I call you up as my first sales guy, and you say, Sean, what does the customer care about? And I don't know, we're going to have a hard time. Yeah.
And so much of what you're doing in that early sales process is collecting feedback, right? 10 to 100 is still part of the product cycle. It's not driven by product anymore, but you're making this transition. And it's so absolutely critical to loop back all that feedback into product, into marketing, into the founding group. Because all you're doing is collecting information. And as a sales team, as a startup team, if you're not paying attention, like this is the sales, whoever's reaching out doing this prospecting is that person on the front lines. In some cases, and hopefully not because you've got a strong product person, but in some cases, it's the only contact with prospects, right? And ideally, you've got a product manager who's out there trying to look for product market fit and is doing these interviews. But, you know, even if they're doing 2 to 5 interviews a week, there's nobody that's going to touch the volume that a BDR is when you're having contact with, ideally a couple a day right? You're reaching out, you're emailing with 10 to 100 people a day. You're probably getting responses from a few people every day. Like you just can't replace that knowledge.
Every BDR we hired, I would say that exact same point on, you are the front lines of the company. You know when the tide of the battle is starting to change. We need to know that information and we'll act on it. And that was my promise to them, that if they've got ideas on how to make the process better, or that maybe this title was better than this title, should we be focusing on them? There's no bad idea. They've got all the at-bats. They've got a lot of that insight.
I think building on what you were talking about earlier about, you're trying to make that transition from first 10 to first 100, or what are some of the systems, trying to automate things and trying to automate or outsource things too early in the process is like, you're just missing out on so much. And you're not going to have so as somebody that you could turn to for something like this, I don't recommend it. Like if you only have 10 customers, unless they're 10 customers that pay you $500,000 a year,
enterprise, baby. Yeah.
Right. You're not going to have the organizational scale that you need to say to another company, okay, this is exactly who I need to go after. This is exactly why they want to respond to me, and go. Right. And then, and here's all the content that we have to support this campaign: case studies, white papers, landing pages, sales content for different, collateral for different aspects of the sales process. When you're going from 10 to 100, there's so much of this that doesn't exist, and you're creating it on the fly. And it's that process of having somebody email you and go, hey, do you have something that does this? You're like, oh yeah, I don't. Well, you're not going to say that, but you're going to go and turn to the founders and be like, hey guys, we need to put something together right now. I mean, the number of times I did that, that's how all of our marketing materials got built in the early days. I mean, we have a VP marketing now, and she does an amazing job. But everything before was something I put together in Illustrator, or I don't know, something worse.
I mock stuff up in PowerPoint. I'd pretend to be a designer, right? You've got something in PowerPoint that, the untrained eye may not be able to tell was not designed professionally. And
yeah, exactly. I used to use Keynote. I had a couple of libraries and just drag things in, copy paste.
Oh man. The startup sales deck, right? Yeah. That's how
100%.
How it happens.
All right, so we're talking tools. We're sending some emails. We've agreed that for those first 10 and a little bit beyond, you're probably not at the scale to really outsource it. We're talking about you're trying to build those initial systems that are gonna start to create some consistency, but you don't want to take it too far and try and outsource or automate absolutely everything.
Right on. Definitely.
So what comes next? We've got our messaging. We've got our list. We've got some tools. What do we do?
It's really now on the iteration and tracking. So just as you mentioned, as you're building up your process, the one thing that's just amazing to me about sales data is if you implement it correctly at the early days, what you have by the time you get to 100 customers is amazing. You can know certain titles, certain industries are closing faster. You can have data around deal size. You can get a lot of interesting stuff. But the one thing that I think a lot of early sales teams miss out on is at the BDR stage. So if you're talking to a prospect and they're not interested, really doing the diligence to figure out why they're not interested. In sales, if you're AE, it's common practice to have a closed loss reason. It's not always common practice to have why they didn't agree to meet with the BDR reason. But that's one that I always encourage folks to implement. Why did they say no? It does two things. One, it encourages your BDRs to qualify out every no. I used to completely fly off the handle, Collin, if I would see something in the CRM where the BDR had a good lead and they just said no, one word, and then there was nothing after that. I was just going, does that mean not now? Does that mean not ever? Does it mean you have no idea what I do? What does it mean?
Yeah, how'd you feel if I put that on your paycheck? No. Where's the amount? Same thing, man.
I guarantee they'd follow up exactly in that scenario. So yeah, really just qualifying it out, because what you learn from why they say no is that maybe it goes back to your messaging, right? Maybe your why us wasn't strong enough. Hey, we're going with a competitor. We're already signed a contract with them. You haven't given us a convincing reason to break contract. Okay, maybe that's a not right now. I need to follow back up with you when your contract is up. Maybe it's I don't understand what you do, which is I'm not explaining why anything very well. Mm-hmm. I had people, so we sold a B2B video product at my last startup. And I had people saying, Sean, I use Zoom And I was trying to set up a demo with them on Zoom. I'm like, if Zoom was a competitor of ours, I wouldn't be using them for this demo link.
Right.
So obviously I wasn't doing a good job explaining what we did in those scenarios. But then of course, sometimes no can mean no. Like for whatever reason, there are accounts where it's just not a good fit, right? They're doing something different. They're looking to really have all the bells and whistles. And if you're not that product and you don't think you ever will be, then that's okay. But now you know that.
One interesting stat I heard that I'm almost entirely sure is made up, but give or take a couple standard deviations, it's probably correct enough, and it paints a picture. It helps you understand what's going on with your customers. Is that at any given time, at any given point in time, only 8% of your total market is actually in market for your solution.
What was the number? One more time.
8%. So only
8%.
So if you look at that total list of all your customers, say you've got a list of 100 customers, 100 prospects, only 8 of them are actually like in market or in that sort of in a buying cycle. Again, I'm almost 100% sure that this number is completely made up. But even if it's wrong, it's probably close enough to true. Like it's obviously not going to be 80%, right? It's obviously not going to be 1%, and it's going to probably range depending on what market you're in. But I think as an interesting, piece of context, like there's only, let's say it is 8%. There's only a certain number of people that are actively thinking about solving this problem right now, right? So with a part of the early sales hustle is getting out, finding those people, right? All of these no's and the reason you want to qualify these no's is you want to figure out, like, is it bad timing? Is it because you don't understand? Because I don't understand your business? Like this is still like early product development, feedback. And so right, you need to understand these pieces.
Absolutely. And I think even just finding the other, 92%, if that's the number that isn't in market, finding out when their cycle time is coming up, it can help you and help your marketing team figure out who you need to be nurturing, who you should be working with. Again, early days, you may not have, you might be wearing all the hats and doing all the outbound and outreach and getting your company's name out there. But down the line, that's good data to have.
Totally. So we've got all these tools. We're having conversations with our prospects. I think that the question that's on my mind is, how do you validate whether you're winning because you've got a stellar salesperson or because you've got a stellar product? Because I think you could have, I know some people that can just sell anything. And I know others that can't sell, that are like the total opposite, but both could be like, you don't know which one you have. So until you sort of take a run at it and start digging in. So how do you answer that question?
Yeah. So it can depend a little bit on your product, but assuming you've got a sales process that enables the customer to see the product or to use the product beforehand, we actually would run split tests of our funnel where you'd have some folks that you'd say, oh yeah, we have a free trial here, come on in, it's 14 days. And you would then track their engagement and you track those deals to see, hey, are these ones actually converting? Are they converting faster? What's the time to close after you get them in the trial? And then we also would have some that you would, kind of almost go the enterprise route where you'd show them the deck and the screenshots of what it looked like. But it's really kind of on the salesperson at that point to say, okay, like, what do you think? And for us, it's a good test to run early on because it tells you a lot about your market. We learned that a lot of our competitors weren't letting people into the product. And the fact that we were actually became a major differentiator because of the usability around the product and the fact that it was easy. They'd heard it before. They said, oh, it's easy. Yeah, sure. We've heard that one before. But then when you put them in the product, okay.
It actually is. It is easy. It's funny. I talked to a sales leader the other day, and he recently relocated to another organization because he's like, if a prospect brings up usability, I know I'm not going to win that. I'll just say that because like I just know I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste their time. If I'm dealing with a bunch of like 27-year-old millennials, I'm not going to win this deal.
Oh man, for sure. So that's a good point, right? You want to know where you win and where you lose. And again, that's knowledge you get on the journey from 10 to 100. But I think for this part of the process, really having some tests that you're running, saying, hey, we're going to have some deals that we're going to rely heavily on the salesperson. We're going to have some that we rely heavily on the product. And let's see which ones come out the other end with the right velocity and the right close rate.
Mm-hmm. I know it's not always practical, and it totally depends on the size of your company. And this is more of a something I learned for entrepreneurs as opposed to salespeople. But I think, and I'm sure it was Jason Lemkin's piece from Aaron's book, Impossible to Inevitable. It might have been a blog post before, But he talks about you're hiring salespeople, hire two. Because if you only have one and they're slogging away and they're producing goose eggs, you don't know if it's because they're an all-star and your product is garbage, or if they're garbage and your product is an all-star, right? And but by hiring two, it at least gives you some perspective. You can compare and contrast, because it's less when you're hiring two, it's less mathematically, it's less likely that you hire two reps that are not performers. So maybe you get one that's better, one that's the other. You can sort of compare and contrast, and that gives you at least it's information. And especially in the early days, and then if you lose one, you don't lose 100% of your sales motion or momentum. You still have that one person. They can train the next person.
Absolutely. If you're just relying on, the sales leader to kind of do all of the process, it's very hard to know, right? Like, I think there's two pieces. Like, one, you can kind of do what we've got here, where you're running almost like a time series experiment where you've got deals over the same timeline and you're doing different things to them. But that's another great way where say, hey, I'm going to bring on a couple reps. I'm ready to backfill and bring on an AE, a couple AEs or a couple BDRs, and just see how they're able to generate leads, see how they're able to close leads. Absolutely. It's a great route to go.
Cool. So I think, on the topic of hiring, because, we're having good conversations, we're tracking those, we're split testing those. When is that right time to bring someone in? And maybe let me take that question back, garble it back. When did you hire your first salesperson?
Ooh, probably too early, right? I mean, school of hard knocks, you're making a lot of mistakes out there. But I can tell you the triggers that we thought we had.
No. When specifically?
I want
date and time. Come on.
So we launched in 2015.
Yeah.
And I did all the sales until about November. I believe we hired our first one. Okay. Yeah. So it was like 6-7 months, something like that. Yeah.
How many customers did you close yourself?
Ooh, we were probably at, call it 30-ish, 30 or 40, something like that.
Okay. And what did that represent in terms of monthly recurring?
Actually in the early days, we had massive problems with pricing. We were still trying to figure out a lot of pieces. Yeah. So I remember I signed up TED Talks. I worked that deal for 3 months and they paid me $60 a month. And I was like, wait a minute, our pricing isn't going to work at this rate, you guys. We need to change. Something's got to give here. I don't know. Maybe we were low 5 figures in MRR at that point.
Okay, cool. And so that's when you hired. What kind of rep did you hire?
Yeah. So initially we hired a BDR, and the reason why I like going with BDR rather than AE is, well, I like you want both ideally, but for me that was the easier role to onboard. Right? It's a lot easier to find folks that have that hustle factor, they have the mentality they can hear no 100 times in a day and just keep on going. And it was a lot easier for us to recruit for that role. And I think that's true in most markets.
And so did they book meetings for you and then you were still closing?
Exactly. And then it got to a point where I got too many demos for me to work by myself. No. I know, the sad salesperson, right?
Yeah.
And I said, we need another person to work the deals. And so really it was a backfill moment. Eventually we learned, how much pipeline each rep could have and what number of accounts a BDR could work at a given period of time. But early days, it's very much backfilling. When you're at a point where you feel stretched, and that usually is visible in your inbox if people want to book meetings with you and you haven't done anything. I had an issue where I had someone who was trying to send me a check for like 10 grand. It was in my inbox for 5 days unanswered. Yeah. And I saw that and I was like, we need to hire someone. That can't be happening. Like, we could have lost that deal, right? He's here's some money and it doesn't work.
I did something similar, but almost the opposite.
Okay.
We went from basically 0 to what should have been 15K in monthly recurring revenue in about 3 months.
Nice.
And then we had somebody look at the spreadsheet. We looked at margins and all that, and it was like, oh, great. This is gonna we're actually gonna be able to make a profit. This is gonna make sense. Be able to build a business. So I checked in with them 3 months later, and they're like, great. Like, sounds like you've been killing it. You've signed all these customers. Like, I looked in the bank account. Where's all the money? And that's when it clicked. I was like, I need to invoice these people. Shit. Hadn't sent any invoices, just single focus on this one thing, and that's all that mattered, and totally forgot to invoice everybody.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say focus is important, man. I mean, you got to get the deals early days. It's not easy.
So coming back to when you hired, so you hired at 6 months and 30 customers, you hired your first BDR.
Yep.
That got you to what stage? When did you hire your next person, and what was that person?
That lasted us about 5 months, and the next person we hired was technically our BDR was ready to go over to a closing role, so we brought in another BDR and moved this guy up to account exec.
Pushed him up.
Yep, he had experience in sales before, so he'd done kind of the whole BDR thing for a while already, so he knew the drill. Came in, was very successful.
Yeah. Okay. And so that model. And then basically you built up from there, or you just kept hiring?
So at that model, we kind of had some ratios. We said, all right, if you get so many deals, you need another AE. If you want to get this level of growth by year end, you're going to need this many opportunities, which is going to mean this many BDRs. And so we were,
Walk me through your math.
In terms
I know it's old and outdated and embarrassing because it's a new startup, but
we had, so for us, it was almost entirely SQL. So our industry did not get a lot generated through inbound. There are other folks that were getting closer to a 50-50 split in SaaS. I was so envious of those businesses. They'd put in 100 leads, in outbound, and they get 100 leads of MQLs. And I'm just like, where are the MQLs? They were supposed to be here. But so how we would do it is we had a ratio of 2-to-1 is what we wound up with, which is 2 BDRs for every AE. And the AE was working about, in their pipe for a month, they'd have maybe 30 accounts they were responsible for kind of dealing with. And then how our sales cycle work, we could sell year round in our industry. Some industries aren't like that. It's more enterprisey. It's December, it's June, or whatever. We weren't like that. We were targeting a lot of mid-market accounts. They were running the credit card for low 5 figures year round. And so that was really our approach. You'd have those 30 accounts in your pipe for an AE. Anytime we generated too many opportunities, we said, we have to make sure that we're either hiring accordingly or planning for that. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of our ratio, though. We had the 2-to-1, 2 BDR per AE, and then the AEs working those ops.
How many ops could one of your AEs handle?
Yeah, so it was 30 in a month is what we had for their cap. So if you had too many in 1 month, it was really a matter of focus.
So 30 net new or 30 total pipeline?
30 total pipeline for the month. Like those are opportunities that were expected to close for that month. So that's how we looked at it. 'Cause it's like who should you be focusing your attention on? There were some activities that we had different numbers at each section. The only one that's coming back to my mind is the ones that they had to close. That's the one that we had the most conversation around, as you might imagine. But yeah, so you had 30 that you were expected to bring in over a given month. And, some of them would come, some would push, but ultimately the close rates we saw were about 20%, which is what we had for what I comped us to a lot of SaaS companies. It seemed like we were about ballpark for what most folks were doing at our stage. And so, yeah, we were losing some ops, we were winning some ops, we were pushing some ops, but all in all, I was trying to get them to focus. So.
So in terms of, if I could summarize, when's the time to bring somebody in? It's when you don't have capacity or when you've sort of broken the company, right?
Exactly.
When I say broken, I mean broken in terms of productivity. There are so many appointments on my calendar, that I can't handle this anymore. Okay, we need to bring somebody in. Initially, though, it sounded like you brought in a BDR first because you were able to close.
Yep.
And what went into the decision behind putting that or hiring that BDR? Just I need to do more. This is my sole focus. This is our number one priority.
In terms of how we were able to get the BDR, or why we went with the BDR instead of an AE.
BDR? Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, I think we found that we had this engine that could produce leads in a way that was very predictable, right? Which was amazing because we were trying a lot of different things, especially after my first 20 emails, I tried a lot of stuff, and not all of it worked very well. But what we learned was, we created this like engine, and it wasn't an engine yet. It was almost like we had some bicycle wheels spinning, and we said this could actually become an engine. And so we wanted to really double down on that because it was working. Gotcha. And that process was much more well-established than our sales process. Our sales process was still at that time up in my head, trying to figure out, who's going to close, how can we get some folks over the hump, how can we manufacture that urgency like we talked about earlier. And so for us, it was really, we have this area we want to invest more resources in, combined with our market. So based in Minneapolis, we had access to a lot of young, raw talent. And so we were able to find folks that met the criteria of a good BDR. They were hungry, they were hustlers, they were willing to put in the work.
Bunch of hockey players, it sounds like.
Exactly. That's what we've got, man.
Right on, man. So I've got one last question. So I guess to summarize, you knew when to hire a BDR because you were doing it all yourself. You had something that was working, and you realized that if I just had somebody to take this on for me, I could double the results here, and then that would allow me to focus 100% of my energy on just being that closer. Then as you were that closer, you realized, okay, I'm at max capacity. If we promote our BDR into the AE role, we hire somebody into them, then that allows you to focus on sort of more closing the bigger deals, and maybe some higher level CEO things. Is that fair summary?
So I'd say that the one thing I really, really like in all this is it's like a success disaster trend, right? I think like most startup sale growth it's triggered by success disasters where you're doing well, but because you're doing well and you don't really have a process, or you don't really have like as much of a team behind you as others might expect, it leads to this area where you're just overwhelmed with something, and you can hire to do that thing and then go and solve problems in the other areas of the business.
Yeah. We joke internally, like I just hit my 6 years as a full-time entrepreneur last month, May 28th. I was pretty stoked on that.
Nice.
We've been a real company for 5 years. I mean, 4.5, depends on when you want to count it. We incorporated a long time, like longer ago than that. But anyway, we've been building revenue, but we slowly joked that, everything we do, you hustle hard, you focus on one thing, then you break the company, and then in a good way, and you try and fix it. So you get so many meetings that you just can't, I remember one time my calendar was booked from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I'm like, this is amazing, but also we need to hire somebody or I'm going to die. Right. And when you get to that, if we don't hire somebody, I'm going to die. It's like, okay, things are broken. We hit that and like, it doesn't go away. We're doing well beyond a $3 million, run rate, probably closer to 4. And, we broke the company a couple of weeks ago. Like we model out, what new customer acquisitions looks like. We model out what churn is going to look like, and then no customers left for 2 months. It's like, oh crap, broke my model. I mean, I'm super pumped.
That's a good problem.
It's great. Our poor team did an amazing job and really stepped up, and we were able to hire 2 great people, and then started last week. Yeah, Friday. So really pumped to have them on the team. But again, it doesn't go away. It just sort of seems like it's more people together that you've got these like little mini swings over this like gradual growth trajectory where you hustle hard, you break things, it slows down, you fix it, you hustle hard, you break things, right? And that seems to be the scale. That seems to be the sort of pattern.
I love that. I mean, it's funny. I think about the success disaster. I remember my favorite one for us was we actually didn't have a limit on the number of meetings a BDR could put on an AE's calendar in a day. And we would run shorter demos. So maybe they were like 30 minutes or like 40 minutes or something like that. And so you'd see like these poor AEs, man. They'd be in like the demo room. We had a demo room. They'd be in there all day, just back to back to backs. And they're doing, 10 meetings or something, just something nuts. And we said, okay, we probably need to not do that, because he didn't follow up with any actual, customers that he's supposed to work this month. And yeah, it's one of those success disaster moments for sure. I love it, but you're spot on, man.
Yeah, I think I remember averaging like 14, 15. I'm like, if I have more than 15 meetings in a day, I probably can't handle that. And then I was thinking about it, and I'm like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. There should be a fraction of that. We need to hire somebody now. You can't build a company on like one person's Herculean effort, because that doesn't scale, Anyway, we got a little bit off track, but I think we really answered the, what do you do with getting your first 10 customers? What are some tools you can use? Talking about how do you validate whether it's the sales process or the person, when is the right time? I have one last question for you, Sean.
Yeah.
Now, pre-question to that, one last question. When was the last time you made a cold call?
Oh man. So I actually was involved in a cold call. Well, a cold call, no, I was involved in a demo last week. So I was doing a workshop for some companies, and a company told me that they had like a demo with a prospect and they weren't sure, they needed some help with it. And I'm kind of like a sales addict, man. I don't know. I needed to get my fix. I said, oh man, send me the link. I'll jump on and I'll listen on with you. And the call went super well. It wasn't a cold call per se. It was more like he's doing his product demo, and afterwards I gave him a bunch of feedback. He could have just recorded it on something like Zoom. I'm not sure why that didn't come up, but he wanted to have a friendly face smiling back at him or something. In terms of cold calling, I actually do a lot of dials for recruiting. So through the Techstars program, we reach out to companies and we say, hey, this is what we're doing. We're an accelerator investor. Do you want to get 15 minutes when we're in town? And a lot of it is very similar. I'm trying to pitch them onto taking time with us. Sometimes they don't know who we are. Obviously, Techstars is a great brand in tech, but in certain regions, we'll go international for recruiting, and they'll be like, I don't know who are these guys. Yeah, and so you have to say, okay, here's what we do. Here's why you should care. Here's why we should connect. And
so here's my favorite new part of this of the podcast. We do a surprise segment called Cold Call Me. So you can pick any company that you're affiliated with. So normally we say we get the guest to do it from their company. But in your case, because so you could do Techstars, or you could do one of the companies that you're supporting, or you could do your old company. But the goal is you get to kind of pitch your product, pitch your company, but you got to do it role playing a cold call with me.
Oh, so, fantastic! All right, so
what do you want to do?
I think I'm going to do Techstars. Do you want to? You're going to be a software founder, Collin? I mean, that's
sure. Set the stage. I'm a software founder. What am I wearing?
Shorts, obviously. Shorts.
Naturally, yeah.
Yeah. All right. I don't know. Hopefully you've got a shirt on, right?
Possibly.
At your disclosure. Yeah, great. So you're a B2B SaaS founder. Maybe you're thinking about raising some money. So I work particularly in the retail program. So hopefully you're related to retail. Sometimes you're not, and that just ends up going sideways, but we'll see.
Sounds good. All right. Ring, ring. Hey, this is Collin.
Hey, Collin, it's Sean. How's it going today?
Good, Sean. Did your voice just crack?
Oh, no, not at all. Am I catching you at an okay time?
Yeah, I got 37 seconds.
37 seconds. Fantastic. Say, Collin, I was curious. I noticed you guys have been raising a little bit of capital lately. How are things going on that front?
Pretty good.
Nice. Are you looking to find other partners specifically in the retail space?
Possibly.
Right on. So do you know anything about Techstars?
No.
Right on. So we are actually the top 2 accelerator program globally. And we work with companies to build their network, grow their business, and ultimately raise some financing. Companies
top 2? That's not very impressive. Why wouldn't I go to the top 1?
Well, we're global. We have 28 locations worldwide, man. So we're closer to you. And in addition, our companies raise $2 million on average across the board. The other difference between us and the other guys is we have very intimate classes. So instead of being in a cohort with 200 other people, it's you and 10 companies. So you actually get to meet me, the other folks involved in the program, as we work together to get your business to that next level.
I'm sticking, man. Your 37 seconds is almost up.
I'm way up. Man.
I'm really busy. Come on, man.
I'd love to get 15 minutes on your calendar. We're actually going to be in your community next week doing a road show. Think we could grab a slot?
You know what? I'm pretty busy.
Love it. All good. Would it make sense to follow up with you then on this potentially via email here? What's
objection handle, man? Come on, push through. You got this.
Let's see here. So all right. So you're raising money. When are you looking to close your funding in this year? When are you looking to close here?
July 17th.
Oh man. Well, so you should meet with us next week, because we as an investor do cut checks very quickly for companies that go into our program. You're in our program cycle, and our partnership here, we work with some of the biggest retailers in the US.
I'll take a meeting if you guarantee to show up with a blank check.
Deal? I cannot show up with a blank check.
Sounds like a deal. Thanks so much for calling, Sean.
Thanks, man. That's a little trickier on the investment side, right? Because I can't agree to give you money, and it's a little different. But usually, folks, Techstars as a brand has been unreal. I get so many doors. I went out to a startup guy conference just with a Techstars t-shirt, and it's like I was a rock star. I don't know. I was like, great, this is awesome. But that's the one that usually opens the most doors for us.
Cool. Maybe I'll start doing that. I'll just wear a Techstars shirt and just
you should. You actually. So you want my hack? You can buy them online on the Techstars store. You don't need to officially. I'm affiliated with Techstars, and so I get one. But you could just have a shirt, man, and be rocking.
Yeah, I'm Collin. I'm Techstars Vancouver. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Absolutely, brother. And so usually, for our like intro calls, it's more about, hey, like we're working with other companies. The fact that other companies have raised $2 million post program is a big deal because early stage first time founders, funding is hard. Really, it's because they don't have their messaging down right. They haven't figured out who their customer is. There's all these things they need to do first, but
now they don't need you. Now they don't need Techstars. They got this episode.
Well, for business development, Techstars does a lot of other stuff too. So
cool. Sean, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been great. Super fun, man. Thank you.
Fantastic, Collin. Thanks for having me, brother. Take care.